This tension, however, became more pronounced in the mid-1960s when many in the church community became heavily involved in the anti-war movement, calling for an end to the Vietnam War. It was during this time that my father's deepest commitments collided in ever-increasing intensity. Before moving to Ann Arbor, his religious, political, and patriotic sensibilities formed a seamless whole that defined his worldview and the source of his deep integrity. In Ann Arbor, that seamless world was rent, and my father found himself feeling more and more alienated from his church home. He eventually stopped attending altogether, though fortunately for me, he and my mother insisted that I continue in my confirmation classes with the pastor in preparation for baptism at age 12, which is part of our Disciples of Christ tradition. It was through these classes and my participation in that vital church community that was deeply involved in the challenging social issues surrounding me that I found myself feeling most at home. The very commitments that made my father feel so alienated from his faith gave my burgeoning faith a sense of shape, focus, and purpose. My father and I had been extremely close until the late 1960s, when his alienation with the church was most acute and my belonging most pronounced. That time marked the beginning of 2 decades of painful tension between us that played out most vividly in bitter political arguments about war, militarization, nuclear proliferation, gender roles, sexuality, and racial discrimination. We disagreed about virtually everything politically. We couldn't seem to resist any opportunity to spar in deeply personal and hurtful ways. Through it all, however, our family bond was never questioned by either one of us. Though we frequently fought, we also frequently regretted our bitter words hurled and tried to mend our brokenness through gestures of love, large and small. Ours was a volatile relationship, but also intimate in its volatility. We defined each other in our opposition and were deeply entwined as a result. I'm happy to report that the war with my father ended long ago, and we have come full circle to the close camaraderie that we shared in my childhood. Our reconciliation was slow and the result of many small recognitions along the way by both of us that we could choose different, more healthy ways to be in relationship. A pivotal moment for me, however, in moving from our conflict-defined relationship to one of reconciliation, came when I overheard my father talking about the war with a fellow veteran at a family wedding gathering several years ago. I was drawn to their conversation from a distance because I sensed a gravity in my father's countenance that was unusual. As I approached, I saw tears in his eyes and realized too late that I'd invaded a deeply personal and private moment between them. When I sought to offer my father comfort, he gently but firmly rejected my advances and sought to recover from the embarrassment of his vulnerable exposure to me. He muttered something like, "It's nothing you could understand." I looked to his conversation partner and saw in his eyes the same moist sadness and departed awkwardly, apologizing for my interruption. I left that encounter feeling an overwhelming sadness and sense of regret. I realized in that moment that there was a part of my father that I never knew, or more accurately, never bothered to see. So caught up was I in defining myself in contrast to him that I failed to see the caricatures of both self and other that I had constructed to maintain a relationship that was hollow in the very places that I assumed contained the most density. 2 of my greatest blessings in life are, first, that this recognition came in time for me to encounter my father in all his fullness and to rebuild our relationship on a more solid foundation. And second, that he was willing to engage in this rebuilding with me. So what does this have to do with us? I would invite our consideration into understanding that my own education, partially here at Harvard, in the entitlement of an Ivy League institution, gave me an arrogance that I wish had been more challenged while I was here. And now as a professor, and someone who finally came around to understand the nature of the fact that my privileges to be at a place like this are all due to my father's sacrifices, and recognizing the challenges in my own and diminishment of my own experiences of my life based on that arrogance. I feel like one of the dimensions that we have to engage in education in relationship to the Ivy part of this encounter is to be more cognizant of the entitlement that these institutions represent and that so many of us who populate these institutions continue to reproduce, wittingly and unwittingly, and to be more conscious about that. And secondly, I take from this the experience of the church community, unusual in itself. The Christian Church Disciples of Christ is a congregational community that in its own polity allows for an immense diversity of theological and political opinions. And it is a tension for us as a world body. But at the same time, there's something about that community that gave us, my father and I, directly and indirectly, a language to understand how you can be both very diverse and also come together in an intentional and respectful and informed way as one community. We have to learn better how to engage our differences not as threatening, but as opportunities for deeper understanding of ourselves and of others. And I believe that that resides primarily in our institutions of education, because it's there that we can both sow the seeds of dogmatic absolutism, or we can sow the seeds of a humble, conscious commitment that allows us to consciously interrogate our own assumptions as well as stand up for that which we believe in. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate being here and look forward to our conversations.